Well, she is the author of 7 very subtle New York Times best-selling books, Guilty, Liberal Victims and Their Assault on America, If Democrats Had Any Brains, They'd Be Republicans, Godless, The Church of Liberalism, How to Talk to a Liberal If You Must, Treason, Liberal Treachery, from the Cold War to the War on Terrorism, Slander, Liberal Lies About the American Right, High Crimes and Misdemeanors. That was the case against Bill Clinton back in 1998, and she's gone subtle again, Bubba. Her latest book, it came out this month, Demonic, How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. Put your hands together for Ann Coulter. Ann, welcome back.
Great to be here, and I can't tell you how much I love to hear a list of my book titles.
It really paints a picture, and I think kind of sets the stage.
It really does. I mean, really, I guess the latest just puts all that together into one giant mob.
Yes, I have finally figured out the last piece of liberalism. I understand now things about them I never understood before, all their little peculiarities, their slogans, their repetition, their worship of their leaders. It's all part of mob psychology.
Well, Ann, explain that a little bit, because I know you focus on that in the book, and you bring out things like Al Sharpton and how he's been successful. Talk a little bit about the mob mentality.
Well, I read a lot of books about mobs, groupthink, herds, that sort of thing. And it's the father of groupthink, Gustave Le Bon, a Frenchman who wrote about 100 years ago. He was the first one to discover the phenomenon and described it, analyzed it in his book, The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind. And it is a perfect description of liberals today. For example, I mean, it's always just been a mystery to me how so many liberals can apparently do well on their SATs. They go to good colleges, and yet they seem so stupid. And it's all explained by a man in a crowd. A member of a mob will lose some of his IQ, become childlike, immature, is subject to strong emotions, simple-minded. They'll tend to elevate leaders, easy infatuation for individuals. They accept contradictory thinking, and I go through each one of these points. Oh, and they grasp on to conspiracy theories, which totally describes liberals. And I go through each one of these and then give, 2,000 examples of how liberals do this. And you really can't say the same about conservatives. This is not just a matter of partisanship.
You know what was funny, Ann, is when I'm listening to this and looking at the book and looking what you're describing, and also classic liberal. This is right out of the playbook. They're the ones who have the audacity to call the Tea Party a mob mentality.
Yes. Well, that's just part of their contradictory thinking. I mean, obviously, I talk about that a lot. The history of political violence in this country, and it has always come from the left. To take one category, presidential assassination attempts, every single presidential assassination attempt in the nation's history, other than the ones that were committed by complete lunatics, a guy who thought he was King Edward of England, and Andrew Jackson owed him money. Right. There are a few like that, but all the ones that were political in some sense were committed by liberals, socialists, anarchists, Emma Goldman followers, communitarians. Squeaky Fromm was upset because she thought President Ford was trying to destroy the redwoods.
Yeah.
You remember President Ford's campaign to destroy every single redwood in the world. There's not one committed by a conservative. And conservatives tend not to talk about the physical attacks on them, for one thing, to avoid copycats, and also because we don't want to sound like, who write for the New York Times, but there isn't a conservative who speaks at college campuses who hasn't been physically attacked. And not just college campuses, dining. As I say, Giuliani's going to an art fair in Bridgehampton, and a well-dressed liberal man who lived in East Hampton, which is a very rich community,
right,
comes running up at Giuliani. This was just reported, in a gossip column, and starts, threatening to punch his lights out and poking him in the chest. Meanwhile, James Carville, Keith Olbermann, Michael Moore, they can walk peacefully any place in America. Conservatives don't behave that way.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, Ann, and I let the conservative team down one day in New York City, but it really makes your point. I actually saw Keith Olbermann
and
on
you need to credit me for picking him out of the crowd. I thought that was a good call on my
Bubba
part.
spots him. We
large pear-shaped man.
Yeah.
You do know it.
As a matter of fact, I looked up and from the waist down, he looked like a middle-aged woman. But but I looked. Yeah, I looked and we gave him a little. Hey, Obi.
We said, "Hey, Obi." I mean, we were nice to him. We disagree with him. We just gave him a little back at you.
But as we move forward, I thought to myself, would I have been a hero on this show if I could have reported that I ran across the street and completely form tackled Keith Olbermann onto the sidewalk? and I didn't do it, I guess, because to make your point, that's really not an option for us on this side.
No, it just never happens. I mean, sometimes I wish it would, just to show them what it's like. But it won't happen. It can't happen. We might joke about it, but it will never happen. It doesn't even get reported, the physical attacks on conservatives. But I mean, look at Bush and people who worked in the Bush administration, which wasn't exactly Ronald Reagan.
Right.
Karl Rove can't do a book signing with these lunatics running at him. It's just nonstop violence from the left, and then they sit back and say, "Oh, we saw an anti-Obamacare sign with a monkey on it. I'm frightened.
Yeah, I mean, well, I look at the same situation, and we deal with it to a degree, but I can't imagine what some of your email must look like.
And you have to deal with it too somehow.
That's what I'm talking about. Is you can hear you in the Limbaughs and stuff. Debate and even at times be degrading as far as, hey, these ideas are stupid, they're idiotic, they've never worked in the history of the world, much less the history of America. But then they'll turn around and say something like, I hope Rush Limbaugh is deaf and he never gets his hearing back, and I hope somebody kills Ann Coulter.
Right.
I mean, those are two completely different responses.
No, that's right. I mean, the things that were said about George Bush, Vanity Fair, Al Gore, George Soros, all compared George Bush to a Nazi. You had William Raspberry, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, who called him the devil. Anthony Lewis in the New York Times compared him to Osama bin Laden. And the point is, this was not hyperbole. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't to belittle him. It was said in dead earnestness, and it was accepted that way by the people reading or listening to these people, to these liberals, and then other liberals go out and physically attack George Bush, Condoleezza Rice, John Bolton, Karl Rove. There are physical attacks. I mean, forget the hate mail. We're a country of 300 million people. There are going to be some nuts out there. And
sure.
The rule of thumb is if they write first, they're not coming. So forget death threats across the transom. These are physical attacks we're talking about. At the Republican National Convention, something that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. It's years in the making. This is a major party's convention, and when Sarah Palin is delivering her speech, two lunatics stand up, these women in wild costumes, stripped down with anti-Palin signs, and start screeching at the top of their lungs. They begin approaching the stage, and our, mighty security guards at the Republican National Convention, this is back in Minnesota, stand frozen. They're like statues. The women get closer and closer to the stage. Two newspapers reported on that event. When the women were arrested, they weren't arrested, were eventually escorted out by our fearless, intrepid guards at the Republican National Convention. Charges were not pressed. They were certainly told, don't do it again, and guess what happened again the next night as McCain was speaking.
Yeah.
So part of the point of my book is I think conservatives and other peaceable Americans, they have such an aversion to causing a scene. They do not react properly when faced with a literal mob mentality, not just the psychological mob I was talking about before. But, for example, the hero of my book, Tim Prophet, who stops that lunatic running at Rand Paul when he showed up at a debate.
Oh, yeah.
She's in a costume. She runs at him. She hits him in the face with her sign through the window, makes another run at him, and then does the famous liberal fake fall down. Oh, you're hurting me, you're hurting me. And Tim Prophet roughly steps on her shoulder. That was lied about throughout the media. Head stomping. Put in Rand Paul, and you will see the first thing that comes up on Google is Rand Paul head stomp. We've all seen the video. The foot was not on her head. I keep saying, boy, you guys, if you have that video, it would be fantastic if you could show it on air. But for some reason, you're not showing that video. In any event, that is how conservatives should react when attacked. That isn't initiating the fight. That is defending your own. And these guards at the Republican National Convention, I mean, you wonder why the toughest man we have to run for vice president turns out to be a woman. Look at the guards.
Well, you're all
And
over.
I wish you could stay with us because I feel like we're just on the cusp of a great discussion here.
I know
I'll
that
come back.
We'd love to have you anytime.
Demonic is the name of the book, How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. You can get an autographed copy for this upcoming Father's Day weekend. Be a great gift, or get one for yourself by going to rickandbubba.com. Look under show notes, and the folks at Premier Collectibles say they will get it to you by this weekend if you order that today, or you can pick up the book wherever books are sold. And thanks for
Always a pleasure,
taking
Ann.
time with us today.
Great to talk to you.
Take care. And
Yep.
Coulter.
We got to get back and go through Sarah Palin's email here, so we'll let you go. Have you ever heard of anything like that before?
Well,
Anything?
Well, yeah. I think you'll find a lot of it in this book right here.